Hi, I'm Max Walker&Williams, and today I'm creating a rebuttal video to another video that's here on YouTube's. So I was on Twitter and a lot of people were atting me, Max, have you seen this video? Max, can we get your feedback on this video? So I took a look and it's by a guy called Lewis Jackson. And it's Lewis basically explaining why he used to think Hbar was a fantastic investment, but he doesn't anymore. And this really piqued my interest because it's incredibly important when you're investing in anything, be it time or money, whatever it might be, it's always important to see what the risks are. It's almost, if not more important to know what the risks are than what the benefits are. And I know why I should invest in Hedera. I want to know why I shouldn't. And so I'm always interested and watch with a very keen eye on any video that says Hedera Hashgraph is going to fail or it's not a great investment or anything. So I was really interested. Watched the video several times, and the video starts with Lewis explaining how it came about. He says he was having a one-to-one call with a client, and that call got him thinking.
I'm not so sure Hbar is a good investment anymore, especially when you marry it up against the other ISO tokens. I want to get into why this has been a thought on my mind recently, and it all came about after a one-on-one call that I had with a client. And the question really was about Hbar being a good investment or not.
Now, he doesn't explain what kind of client. Presumably, he's not a fitness instructor or an accountant or a solicitor. And actually, when you go on the YouTube video, scroll down the bottom, you can see the description. There's links to his other outlets, his social medias and things. And one of them says, click here, for hands-off investors. And you click on the website, you click on the link, and it takes you to a website. It's only a one-page form. You fill the form out and presumably they get in touch with you. But it's safe to say from the title of the link, which is passive investors, hand-off investments, that it's a client in a financial sense. So he's giving financial advice or financial opportunities, or he's taking a commission for investing other people's money. So he's giving financial advice to this one-on-one client. He's also obviously giving financial advice on YouTube, and he's saying that he doesn't believe Hbar's a good investment. I'm concerned at this point for Lewis because if he's registered with the FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the regulatory body here in the UK that oversees, financial institutions, financial advisors, financial products and that sort of thing. If he's registered with them, then he really should be showing that on his website, even if it is a one-page contact form. And he doesn't need to be saying this ridiculous legal defense, this is not financial advice, whilst giving financial advice on YouTube. If he isn't registered with the FCA, then he really shouldn't be having one-to-one calls with clients, giving them financial opportunities, financial advice, and he's advertising the fact that he is doing that on the internet. So I'm nervous for him. Lewis is a fellow Brit, which is always nice to see people in Britain getting into crypto and trying to help people with their financials. So I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I have a bias, I have to admit it, being British myself. And he seems like a genuinely nice guy. Having watched the Hbar video several times, more, 10 times maybe even, and watching some of his other content, he really seems like a sincere, nice guy. But they can be the most dangerous people because a little bit of information is an incredibly dangerous thing. And he isn't an obvious scammer that you can see through and say, this guy's just trying to pump and dump a token or he's trying to do this or that, the other. No, this is somebody who sincerely believes what they're saying. They just don't know what they're talking about. And they can be the most dangerous ones, in fact. So there are three fundamental things that you have to consider before even considering an investment. And they are risk. So what is the likelihood of me losing my investment altogether? What is the likelihood of a stock going to zero, of a crypto project going to zero, of a property investment burning down and the insurance not paying out, etc. The second one is ROI, or return on investment. How much is the promise to pay on what I've invested? What is the return? How much rent will that property pay me? What are the staking rewards if it's crypto? What are the dividends if it's a company I'm investing in? And so you want to know what your return on investment is. And the third one is capital appreciation. How much and by what likelihood is my initial capital investment, my nest egg, how much I put in, how much is that going to be worth at the end? Or in the example of property, what's the property likely to sell for should I decide to sell it when I come to sell it? So what's the risk? What's the return whilst I own the asset? And then what's the capital appreciation? How much will I make when I sell the asset? But Lewis only looks at number 3. He makes no mention of number 1 or number 2, the risk or the return on investment. And this is even more worrying when you consider that Lewis is advertising on his links for hands-off investors, passive investors. And this is a small but very important point. The reason this is more concerning when considering passive investors is because generally passive investors fit into two different categories. The first and largest is people in their autumn years, retirees, people who have a pension. Now, these are people who feel they're too old to work, or too tired, incapacitated for some reason, or are just at the end of their working careers, or past that. People in their 65, 70, 75, 80, those sort of ages. And so they haven't got the ability to recoup their losses should they make any. And they only have this nest egg. And they need that nest egg to produce income so they can sustain themselves, so they can eat, buy clothes, and pay for heating. And so they're looking for something very, very low risk, and so they should, to put the investment into that pays them a return that they can then live off and keep their capital. The second group of passive investors, generally speaking, is people of working age. So they're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, they go to the gym, they have children, they have commitments, they have hobbies, and they don't have the time to be an active investor, meaning they don't have the time to buy a property, renovate it themselves, oversee the builders, learn how to paint, manage the property, grow the portfolio themselves. They're too busy building their careers and working. And it's very important to them that they are able to save a little bit of money every week or month and put that away for a rainy day and to save for their pension for the people in their autumn years, so that they have that nest egg to invest and have a comfortable life when they retire and are no longer able to work. And so to those category of people too, they are very risk averse, because the last thing they want to do is pay into something for 10 years and then for it to only go back to zero, because they can never earn that time again. And it's so important that they have something, so when they're not earning, most people don't have a private pension, most government pensions aren't worth a lot at all anymore, and so they need those savings in order to be able to sustain themselves when they're older. Both categories of people are relying on the capital to return them money so that they can live and maintain their lifestyle. And they are massively risk averse. So to give this category of people on YouTube and on one-to-one calls investment advice that doesn't make any mention of risk is madness to me. I cannot believe that Lewis doesn't look at risk or return on investment, which are probably the two most important things to arm's length, passive, hands-off investors. Lewis begins giving his investment advice by firstly admitting that he told people on YouTube, and presumably his clients on his one-to-one calls, that Hbar was a good project. He said, "I used to believe Hbar was a fantastic investment." Then admits that he'd never asked any questions. He'd never done any research. Can you imagine how you would feel watching that video if you've trusted Lewis or trusted anyone with your money, or invested your money, either given him your money to invest for you or invested your money on his say-so, for him to then later admit in a video that he's never asked any questions? That beggars belief to me, that you wouldn't research. You'd admit that first of all you wouldn't do the research in the first place, but then to admit that you've never asked any questions when giving people financial advice blows my mind. I've never seen a video like this, sincerely. I have never seen. In fact, let's see the clip.
And that's as far as the rationale took me, right? I didn't ask any further questions, but it became apparent very recently that actually looking even further at the tokenomics of these specific blockchains could really help to inform our decisions moving forward. But let's get into the negatives of Hbar, and ultimately this is what's kind of swayed my thought process and why I won't say any more from this moment forward. Any of the ISO tokens, just go for it, That's not what I'm going to be saying anymore. I wish I'd discovered this a little bit earlier about Hbar, because then I could have shared this information earlier. But look, we're all on a journey and I learned it now, so...
So Lewis is saying there that learning about and researching about the investment might help to make more informed decisions moving forward. Do you think? And then he's laughing. This is not funny. This is people's life savings. It's their pensions. It's hard-earned money that people are putting into projects off the back of, sometimes solely off the back of one video, one person's video. And Lewis has a far bigger following than I do. Double, maybe even triple, I can't quite remember, the subscribers that I do on YouTube. And he's laughing, it's a kind of an awkward, embarrassed laugh, about the fact that he never asked any questions on previous research or projects that he invested in and told other people to invest in. There's nothing funny about this. This is people's hard-earned life savings.
I wish I'd discovered this a little bit earlier about Hbar, because then I could have shared this information earlier. But look, we're all on a journey and I learned it now, so.
Okay, let's move on to utility, supply and demand. And Lewis decides to compare Hbar to XRP. I don't think he could have chosen a worse comparison to try and make the point that he's trying to make.
How do the tokens work? And let me talk about XRP just quickly for a second here. When you look at XRP and its utility, what it does requires the XRP token. XRP has a utility that is based on supply and demand. If there are more people using that network, more tokens are inevitably going to be taken out of the supply. The demand is going to increase over time with a smaller supply, and this is called the virtuous cycle that Molly Elmore talks about. And so the price of an XRP goes up directly in accordance to the utility of the asset. So the more the XRPL is being used, the more XRP tokens would be required, and therefore the supply and demand relationship, the price has to go up for XRP. For me, this is a very positive tokenomics when we're only talking about the price appreciation of the asset. But Hbar is slightly different. It doesn't work like that.
Hbar absolutely works like that. I would love Lewis to make a video on how he thinks the Hedera Hashgraph network operates and how it does it without the use of Hbar. You absolutely need Hbar in the same way that you need XRP. So I don't understand why he's saying that it's completely different, because it simply isn't. In fact, nearly every crypto project that I've ever come across, you need the token in order to interact on the network. The token is there to facilitate transactions on the network. But Lewis doesn't explain why Hedera is different, but he claims that Hedera is different. So utility on the network doesn't have anything to do with the demand for the token, but you need the token to operate the utility on the network. It just flat out doesn't make any sense. I don't understand how he could have possibly come to that conclusion. And actually I could end the video there, because in that fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship between utility on the Hedera Hashgraph network and the requirement for Hbar, the demand, supply and demand for Hbar on the network, by misunderstanding that, anything he says based off that fake foundation is a nonsense. But there are some other things that are important and need pointing out. So let's keep going.
So Hbar's tokenomics are really strange, really interesting, right? Essentially what they have is a predetermined amount of Hbar that is available, and that's 50 billion. However, they limit the amount that is currently available and slowly increase the percentage that is available over time. So while there might be 50 billion tokens that are even possible on the Hedera Hashgraph blockchain, only a small percentage of the Hbar that is possible to have is actually even available. It's actually even unlocked. So every certain amount of time, they release Hbar into the market. By doing this, they make sure that the whole system isn't flooded with tokens, because if they do get flooded with tokens, it devalues them. Again, this is a supply and demand thing.
So Lewis starts by saying that Hedera Hashgraphs, Hbar's tokenomics, are really interesting and strange. The reason he says they're really interesting and strange is because there's a fixed supply and they haven't released them all at once. I can't think of another crypto project in the top 300 by market cap, maybe other than Ethereum. Ethereum has a technically unlimited supply. I don't know any other cryptographic project, if you do, please comment below, certainly in the top 50, that doesn't have a fixed supply and that hasn't released all the tokens in one go. So in what way is Hedera really interesting and strange regarding its tokenomics? Now Lewis really gets muddled up. He's trying to make the point that Hedera and Hbar are completely separate things, which they are. But in explaining that, he calls Hedera an ISO token. Listen for yourselves.
Hedera and Hbar are also different. The company Hedera is going to see some massive growth in this ecosystem. It's going to be one of those ISO tokens.
So he's essentially saying that Hedera is Hbar, whilst trying to make the point that Hedera is not Hbar. Can you see the conflict there and the misunderstanding? His whole school and train of thought, like calling Hedera a blockchain all the time when it's a hash graph. And those are small, you might say, Max, you're nitpicking. Yeah, but they're really important points, because if I'm trying to convey to you that I'm a golf expert, I'm not, I know nothing about golf. If you listen very carefully, somebody who really knows their stuff uses all the correct terminology. So when I'm talking about golf, I would never call a golf club a golf bat. But there's very little difference between bats and clubs. You use them both to hit things. It's a sport, balls, but they're very, very different. And if I'm trying to convince you that I'm a golf expert and I call it a golf bat, not a golf club, you're going to pick up, something's going to not land right there. You're going to think this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Hedera Hashgraph is a hashgraph. It's not a blockchain, and that is a fundamental important difference. And when you're operating at the level Lewis is, with that many followers, and you're giving something as important, as serious as financial advice, then you need to get the terminology right, because it gives a self-confidence, it gives the person watching confidence that you know what you're talking about. You study it and read it so much that it becomes ingrained in you. And to call Hedera blockchain just sounds, it's like stroking a dog the wrong way. It just doesn't sit right. It's not right from an expert. But Lewis isn't an expert. Oh, just over halfway through Lewis's video, the wheels really start to fall off. Just have a listen at what Lewis says he's looking for in an investment. Bearing in mind that this is passive income, hands-off investors, hands-off investments. What is Lewis looking for in an investment?
Because Hbar is released in this slow and measured way, it's actually designed to discourage excessive speculation in the asset. So the way that they're doing the tokenomics, the way they're releasing that release schedule of Hbar is actually for continued, stable, and slower growth over time, rather than this massive increase due to speculation. And I think the majority of us in here are looking for that kind of explosive move.
So Lewis believes that steady and constant continuing growth is a bad thing. He's looking for explosive movement. Another term for explosive movement is pump and dump. The price pumps, you dump. That's trading. That is not investing. Investing is looking for compounding interest, a decent return on investment, low risk, and a decent capital appreciation, not speculative pump and dump explosive growth. So Lewis is claiming to be one thing while actually looking for another thing. And I don't blame him, because for Lewis, as a young guy, that probably is the right tolerance of risk. He should have a really high tolerance for risk, because he's young enough to dust himself off, pick himself up, reinvest, go again, get a job, do whatever he has to do to make it work. He probably has liabilities quite small. If he has a family, a small family, they're young, they're not costing him too much yet. As I've learned, I have 3 children and they just get more and more expensive. And so he doesn't have those responsibilities yet, probably. And he's certainly of working age. So Lewis is giving investment advice on his own preference. But anyone listen, he doesn't make that explicit. He doesn't say, this works for me because I'm able, if I lose all my money, it's not the end of the world, I can start again, I've got time. He just says this is a great idea because we're all looking for explosive growth. But some people aren't looking for explosive growth. They'd like explosive growth, but at what cost? What are the risks? What's the downside? Because Lewis shouldn't even be talking about ISO compliance. He shouldn't be talking about XRP, Hedera, or any of those. If you want explosive growth, Lewis should become an expert in meme coins, Dogecoin, all the nonsense, greater fool theory. There's nothing wrong with that if you're honest with yourself and say, look, I'm looking for explosive growth. I'm looking for 100x. Well, everybody knows in the real world that 100x is not a sustainable growth model in any industry. It's very, very rare. I'm sure people can find exceptions. And if you know one, please leave it in the comments below because I'd be very interested. But generally speaking, if you're seeing 100x growth, something is speculative. It's not based off real world utility or value, which are all the things that Lewis talks about in the video. Utility, value, tokenomics. None of that matters if it's greater fool theory, Dogecoin, pump, dump. So Lewis has to decide and at least consider the people that are watching this that might not be in the position where explosive growth is a reality. So at this point, if you watch the video, and I strongly suggest you do, I will put a link in the description below. It's only 9 and a bit minutes long. Have a watch of it and see what you think for yourself. As we move into the last quarter of Lewis's video, he's now in a real mess. It's actually quite hard to untangle all the contradictions, misinformation that's now collected up in this video. but I've managed to break it down into 4 points, and I'm going to have to read them off because they're quite detailed, and it's important because I want to unpick and just demonstrate really simply how confused Lewis is. It's actually quite impressive how much misinformation and misunderstanding and contradiction one person who's this sincere and this genuine has managed to condense into 9 minutes. So we're now at a point where Lewis was saying at the beginning of the video that utility is key. XRP is going to win, it's going to fly because it's got real world utility, and that is a great thing, and it produces more and more value, and the value drives demand. The demand drives, takes up the supply, and the price just keeps going up and up and up. And we could really see some explosive growth on Ripple. That's what he said. He's now saying that utility doesn't matter. What really matters is the tokenomics. And the release of the supply of a token is actually the determining factor between whether we see or don't see explosive growth. But XRP has double the supply of tokens that Hbar has. There are 50 billion Hbar, but there's 100 billion XRP. So XRP would need double the amount of utility in order to do the same amount, based on his calculations, of price increase that Hedera would need to do. He's saying that XRP is a better investment because of utility. Hedera is doing more transactions than like the next top 10 projects put together, but that doesn't matter because of its tokenomics. But its tokenomics are better than Ripple's in Lewis's example. There are 100 billion XRP and there are 50 billion Hbar. So then Lewis goes on to say that we possibly can't see explosive growth on Hbar, or it's incredibly unlikely. It's unfair to say, he didn't say it couldn't happen, he just said it's massively unlikely. But this is also wrong. From the 1st of January 2021 to the 19th of March, Hbar went from 0.03 cent to 0.34 cent. That's over a 10x in 78 days. If you'd invested $100,000 in Hbar, you'd have $1 million in 78 days. That's 11,538 profit a day, every day for 78 days. $11,500 every day for 78 days. And Lewis is saying explosive growth is not possible. Lewis states that XRP is a better investment than Hbar because Hbar is releasing its tokens too slowly. They're doing this to control the price and slow things down, which is in part true, but actually it's got a lot more to do with the Hbar Foundation, Swirls Labs, the Hashgraph Association, who are holding these Hbars back to give out in grants to people building on the network. I think Lewis hasn't realized there's a Hbar Foundation and just thinks that the supply is all in one pot and it's just being drip fed into the market to not hurt the price. When in actual fact, a large proportion of that Hbar is being held back in order to give it to companies building on the network. And clearly there'll be KPIs that they have to meet. So they promise 1 million Hbar, first payment up front, second payment after you do this, third payment after you do that. Well, they need the Hbars in stock in order to be able to meet those commitments. And some of those commitments are for years. So they need to hold those Hbars back. It's got nothing to do with the price of Hbar specifically. But this is the really interesting point. Get this. One of Lewis's biggest issues with Hbar is that they're drip feeding the tokens themselves too slowly in the market, which is causing continued unstable growth, but not this explosive growth. Lewis actually claims that only a tiny percentage, he uses the word tiny percentage, of the 50 billion Hbar tokens that exist have been released, are in circulating supply. Have a listen.
Essentially what they have is a predetermined amount of Hbar that is available, and that's 50 billion. However, they limit the amount that is currently available and slowly increase the percentage that is available over time. So while there might be 50 billion tokens that are even possible on the Hedera Hashgraph blockchain, only a small percentage of the Hbar that is possible to have is actually even available. It's actually even unlocked.
So Lewis says that Hbar's circulating supply is a small fraction of the 50 billion tokens. He hasn't even bothered doing a simple Google search to see how much the circulating supply of Hbar is. Having claimed that he's now going to ask more questions and do a bit more research, having claimed that, he hasn't even bothered. Because the actual circulating supply of Hbar at the moment is 62%. 62% is not a small fraction of the total supply. It's well over half. And this is where it gets really embarrassing for Lewis. XRP is a better investment because Hbar is releasing the tokens too slowly into the market. XRP is 5 years and 1 month older than Hbar. And how many, as a percentage, how much of the XRP do you believe is in circulating supply? 52%. So Hbar is not a good investment because they're releasing the tokens too slowly to see explosive growth. They've released 64% of the total supply. XRP is a good investment because they've released 52% of the supply in 5 more and 1 month years time. I don't need to explain the contradiction to you. I mean, it's just mental. It's just madness. I actually don't know what to say. Hbar is not a good investment because they're drip feeding the tokens too slowly into the market. They've released 62% of their supply. XRP is a good investment because they're not slowly feeding their coins, tokens into the market. They've only released 52%. 12% less than Hbar in 5 years more time. Lewis, what are you talking about?
For example, if XRP and XLM and XDC, they all went up 100x, for example, Hbar likely would only go up 20. It would be limited because of the way the tokenomics work.
So to be clear, Lewis is saying that Hbar is a bad investment for explosive growth because of the tokenomics and because they're releasing the Hbars too slowly, despite the fact that they've released 64%, which is 12% more than what Lewis deems to be a good investment, XRP, who've released only 52% of their total supply in 5 more years. They're 5 years They're 5 years older than Hbar, and they've released 52%. Hbar's released 64% in 5 less years. But Hbar is a bad investment for explosive growth because of the way they're releasing their tokens. Okay, Lewis finally leaves it to the end to really demonstrate that he doesn't have a good grasp on what investing is, and he certainly doesn't consider investing from the perspective of anyone other than a young man looking for a get-rich-quick scheme and a pump and dump, which is what Lewis is. Nothing wrong with that. He is a young guy, and he says in his own words he is looking for explosive action, which is a really nice way of saying pump and dump. He's looking for that get rich quick, 100x in a week. That's what Lewis is looking for. But he doesn't, that's not investing. That's speculative trading. It's not investing. It's not investment. In fact, he's right. It's not investment advice. It's trading advice. And I laugh, but it's actually not funny because some people will have bought a product based on that advice, and they might be lucky and it might be okay, but they also might not be. And they've been exposed to risk that they needn't have been.
But we have to really align our vision for the future. I know many of us are in here to kind of buy and hold. But when we look at buying and holding, there's also a number on that for us individually. Like, do I want to buy and hold an asset that goes up 2 times? Or do I want to buy an asset that goes up 5 times over the same time period? You're just going to choose the one that has more upside for you.
So let's expand on Lewis's very simple example. Option 1, double your money in 2 years. Option 2, 5x your money in 5 years. $100 to $200, $100 to $500. But in the real world, it's never as simple as that. There are other things we have to take into consideration. So number 1, if I told you option 1 is double your money, as Lewis says, but there's a 10% chance you will lose your investment altogether. It takes 1 year for both to double X and 5X. And in that year, option 1 pays you 10%. So 10% chance of losing all your money, 90% chance that you won't, 10% return on your investment, paid to you every month that you can then take and eat, spend at the shops, do whatever you've got to do, and you'll double your money at the end of the year. Investment number 2, you're going to 5x your money in the same 1 year period, but it pays you nothing between today and then, and there's a 90% chance you will lose all your money. Now, there's no right answer with this, of course. It depends on everybody's personal preference for risk, how much money you're willing to lose, how your investment portfolio, what it looks like. But just to say, option 1, as double X, option 2, 5X, which would you choose? It's obvious, option 5X. Well, no, it's not obvious because it's not as simple as that. And only somebody with a real lack of understanding of how the real world works would say that it is that simple. Because personally, I would choose option number 1. I have the passive income coming in, which is fantastic, cash flow. I can use that for my lifestyle. I have a very big chance of not losing all my money, a great chance, 90% chance of not losing all my money, and I'm going to double it in a year, which is a great return. And maybe I'll put a little bit into option number 2 because I'm looking for that big 5X, but I understand there's a 90% chance I'm going to lose my money. I would not choose number 2 as Lewis advises you to and says he would for himself if it was my entire life savings or my pension, or I was 90 years old and that was my only source of income, because guess what? It doesn't pay a return. But Lewis doesn't even touch on that. Hbar pays a 6.5% return. And I think Lewis would agree. He seems to like the project and he seems to get that much. But the risk of Hedera, what's the risk? What does Lewis think the risk of Hedera Hbar going to 0 is? I would argue very, very little. It pays 6.5%, which you can then cash out and use as you need to, or you can reinvest and compound it. And of course, compound interest is the 7th wonder of the world, so says Einstein, and he seemed to be pretty smart. And I believe that Hedera could 10x in 78 days. I believe that because it's done it before, but Lewis hadn't bothered to check. I hope this video has been informative. I hope I haven't been too hard on Lewis, but it's important because, as I say, this is people's life savings. It's their hard-earned money. And Lewis is laughing and joking about advising people to invest in things he's done no research on by his own admission. And he's got a massive following. So it's important that videos like these are made, and I feel compelled to make them. And I will continue to do so while other people continue to make really dangerous content, in my opinion. As always, thanks ever so much for watching. I'll see you soon.